Well, shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Shabbat night lesson 47. On our way to 52 lessons through the first 5 books of the Bible in 1 year. I am excited about our lesson for tonight as we go up line upon line and precept upon precept. A little commentary on certain aspects of our lesson, but we are going to have a great time in our lesson on tonight. And I see my sister has joined us. So welcome to our Shabbat night class. And we are fastly approaching the end of this cycle for us before we begin the next cycle of Torah study, because it's something we study for the rest of our days. And so we never get tired because we live by every word that proceeds from the mouth of the Father through the written word that has been handed down to us. So thank you again for joining us, and we are going to have a great time in the word on tonight. Ray. Awesome lesson. Awesome lesson because it talks about something that is so important for us in regard to how we live this life as children of the Most High. And so we are excited that Re'eh means behold or see, as Moshe is going through his teachings to the children of Israel before he will go up on the mountain and not come down. He will die. And so he is seeing through spiritual eyes because he's telling the children of Israel things that have not even transpired, but he's telling them that choose this day what you will do, whether you will walk in the spirit or walk after the flesh. Choose today. And he's talking to them about things that I know seem kind of foreign to them because here they were on the east side of the Jordan, still eating manna, still around the tabernacle. And so Moshe is telling them about a time when they're going to be in their own land, about the time when they're going to decide to build a temple, something that happened way much, much later, 1,000 years later with David and Solomon. And so he's talking to them and explaining things to them that may have seemed strange because they had been in wilderness for 40 years in the desert. And yet and still he's talking to them about what it's going to be like when they go in this land. And it's amazing. Let me see, somebody's trying to get on. Hold on, let me look. Oh, okay. So it's an amazing lesson, and we are excited that we get an opportunity to go through it, hopefully see with our spiritual eyes so that we can fully glean everything that the Ruach HaKodesh wishes to reveal to us in this word on tonight. Seeing with spiritual eyes. Well, we are supposed to walk in the spirit and not after the flesh. That means we're supposed to see with our spiritual eyes, with the eyes of the spirit, guided by the Ruach HaKodesh, or the Holy Spirit. And Moshe is reminding them that don't mix things up. Don't bring in pagan ideas and bring in practices into what they had been taught. This is how you ought to live. This is what you ought to do. And you have to choose to do this. You have to choose to obey and then do it. And you have to choose to disobey and then do it. Don't practice what the pagan nation. Don't even ask about it. Just tear up whatever they're doing, burn it up, and be done with it. Don't keep their idols. Don't do anything as souvenirs. Nothing. Get rid of it because you're opening up a door for something that you don't understand. But Moshe, looking through with his Re'eh, spiritual eye, he's seeing things that can be the consequence of disobedience. And so he's telling the children of Israel to choose what? Order and understanding, and not chaos and misunderstanding. And so we know that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and to do whatever the enemy can to project us into doing contrary to what the word tells us to do. And a lot of times we have to just study the word, which is what we are attempting to do in our Torah classes, and decide and allow the Holy Spirit to minister to us so that we can see it through spiritual eyes and begin to practice things that we have been falsely taught we don't have to worry about. Well, according to what Moshe says, we do. We have to worry about it, and we have to plan to act differently and then do it. And so with that, we have a fascinating lesson on tonight. We're going to pray, then have our communion, and then begin our lesson for tonight. Yes, let us begin. Jehovah, our Elohim, we bless you for this day. This is the day that you have made. We rejoice. We are glad in it. We thank you for this opportunity to study your word together, studying to show ourselves approved, workmen not ashamed of our hire, rightly dividing the words of truth. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh and Yeshua HaMashiach, our Lord, Savior, and King, sent to guide us on this journey, to do all we have been sent here to do, and to teach others, not only in word, but in example, of the goodness of your word. Now, in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, we pray this prayer. Amen. All right, with that, we're going to get ready and take our communion, because in the book of 1 Corinthians, chapter 11, verses 25 through 32, Shaul, or Paul, taught what he said was taught to him directly by Yeshua, our Messiah. And he said that he revealed to him that on the night that Yeshua, before his death, as they were sitting to eat that meal, he took bread. He broke a piece and then he passed it around so that each one could take a piece. First, he blessed the Father for the bread. Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech ha'olam hamotzi lehen min ha'aretz. Blessed are you, Jehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Then he told them to eat, for this bread is symbolic of my body that is broken just for you. Do it often, always in remembrance of me. And so we eat. Then he took a cup of wine. He passed it around. He blessed the Father for the wine. Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam ori pari agafen. Blessed are you, Jehovah, our Elohim, King of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Then he told them to each drink. He said, for this is a symbol of my blood that is shed for the remission of your sin and for a new covenant relationship with me. Do it often, always in remembrance of me. And so we drink. And as we do this, we understand that there may be parts of what we do that we don't understand, but wherever there's obedience, blessings flow. And we need all the blessings that we can get to get us through each and every day of our lives and through each and every situation. For as Shaul said, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers in the heavenlies. So we have to understand that we need help. We need the Ruach HaKodesh, but Yeshua reminds us that he has given us power over all the power of the enemy. So in obedience, we get the opportunity for the benefits of this help that we have been so graciously given by Yeshua HaMashiach. And so with that, we're going to get into our lesson for tonight and get into our shared screen. So let's get there. All right. So let's get to our slideshow presentation. And here we are. So we are in lesson 47, 47 of 52 lessons that'll get us through the Torah or the first 5 books of the Bible in, well, basically 52 weeks. So with that, this lesson is titled Re'eh, or behold or see. We'll see that in the first line of our lesson for tonight. From Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26 to chapter 16, verse 17. And this is August 21st, 2026. We're only about 6 weeks away from Sukkot. So let's get started. And we know that we start off with our Torah lesson, that is companion lesson for Re'eh, which is Isaiah 54 and 11 through 55 and 5. And the reason we have these companion studies is because for a period of time, many centuries, it was illegal to teach Torah, the first 5 books. And so what the rabbis had to do was basically create a system whereby they could use other parts of the scriptures, which it wasn't illegal to do. They could use other parts of the scripture that would refer back to the lessons of the Torah. And so we know then how important Torah study is because of the difficulty that was encountered by the children of Israel and the believers under Yeshua, afterwards making it illegal to study Torah, period. And so with that, we are in that period called we're in the period of consolation. Remember those weeks leading up to Yom Kippur? We're in that period now. And so we're going to have consolation or encouragement because it was during this period that the temple was destroyed, first temple and then second temple destroyed by the Romans. First temple by the Babylonians, it was rebuilt, and then the second temple was destroyed by the Romans. And so in that, we are now in that period when basically all hope was lost. And of course, Isaiah was the prophet that witnessed the taking away of the northern kingdom, the northern 10 tribes, in the captivity of the Assyrians, and then prophesying to the southern kingdom, the 2 tribes of Judah, where the temple was, that look, you're not learning anything. You're following in the path of your brothers whom you saw destroyed. And only the grace of Jehovah kept you from being destroyed. And now you're following in their footsteps and doing the very same things that they did. So Isaiah prophesied these things to the southern kingdom, and they rejected it, and of course, later went into captivity. So some 150 almost years later, the southern kingdom went into captivity, not doing what the prophet Isaiah reminded them of. So with that, we start in chapter 54, verse 11. Storm-ravaged city, unconsoled, I will set your stones in the finest way. Lay your foundations with sapphires. Make your windows shine with rubies, your gates with garnet, your walls with gemstones. Once again, this is consolation because the people, you tell them you're going to lose hope because you don't even believe this is going to happen, but this is what's going to happen because of your disbelief, your unbelief. And so then he goes on to tell them something that I think I really should have highlighted even a little more. All your children will be taught by Jehovah. Your children will have great peace. So this reminds us of something that really is kind of a pet peeve of mine with the churches of today, and that is the fact that more emphasis is not given to the fact of teaching and training the children. We want to train the parents, but without training the children, that next generation does not understand the power of the word in which we're trying to teach them, the necessity for the word, and they don't value it as much. And so therefore, we're continually going through a cycle where the children basically don't want anything to do with the faith. And then at some later point in time, when they're much older, then they return back to the faith that their parents may have shown them. But in the meantime, their children then are suffering from what? Not being taught the word from even infancy. And so not having more schools and things like that for our children is really a disgrace for believers. In righteousness, you will be established far from oppression with nothing to fear. Now, this is when Yeshua returns. Far from ruin, for it will not come near you. Any alliance that forms against you will not be my doing. Whoever tries to form such an alliance will fall because of you. So he's basically reminding them that Jehovah is saying that things are going to be formed against you. And we know that in our everyday lives because we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers in the heavenly. So we're wrestling not only against the evilness of this world system in which we live, but those figures in the heavens that want us to fall apart, that want us to not know the word, that want us to not realize the power that we have. And so all of this is working against us. So it's only by a continual study of the word can it really get into our spirit and help us obey and do what we're called to do. He says in verse 16, it is I who created the craftsman, who blows on the coals and forges weapons suited to their purpose. I also created the destroyer to work havoc. Then he says something that is one of my favorite songs, no weapon made will prevail against you. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. In court, you will refute every accusation. The servants of Jehovah inherit all this. The reward for their righteousness is from me, says Jehovah. Now, as we complete chapter 55, verses 1 through 5, all you who are thirsty, come to the water. Remember where Yeshua told them when he was in the temple courtyard? Come and drink. All who are thirsty, let him come unto me and drink. We see where that was written earlier by the prophet Isaiah. You without money, come buy and eat. Yes, come, buy wine and milk without money. It's free. Why spend money for what isn't food? Your wages for what doesn't satisfy. Listen carefully to me, and you will eat well. You will enjoy the fat of the land. Open your ears and come to me. Listen well, and you will live. I will make an everlasting covenant with you, the grace I assured David. So he promised David that someone from his lineage would always be on the throne. And we know that Yeshua is from the lineage of David. He says, I have given him as a witness to the peoples, a leader and lawgiver for the peoples. You will summon a nation you do not know, and a nation that doesn't know you will run to you. For the sake of Jehovah, your Elohim, the Holy One of Israel, who will glorify you. So Yeshua is going to come and teach the word for 1,000 years. And in that time, all will know that he is teaching that word. So we have the opportunity now to study. That's why we study to show ourselves approved. To study the word. And then not only be hearers, but doers of the word as well. So that really completes our Haftarah lesson in the Tanakh or the Old Testament. And now we're going to go to the Brit Hadasha or the New Testament and for behold, and we are going to go to John chapter 7, verses 37 through 52. Now on the last day of the festival, Hoshana Rabbah, Yeshua stood and cried out, here it is, if anyone is thirsty, let him keep coming to me and drinking. This is a continual process. Just as your thirst cannot be satisfied on one day, for the next day, you have to do, what did he say? Keep coming to me and drink. Keep studying that word. Keep drinking it in. Whoever puts his trust in me, as the scripture says, rivers of living water will flow from his inmost being. Now, he said this about the Spirit. That's the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, whom those who trusted in him were to receive later. The Spirit had not yet been given because Yeshua had not yet been glorified. So we know that that was something that was added by John to help the people understand, because of course John understood what? The arrival of the Holy Spirit after the death and resurrection of Yeshua. John understood that. And so now he's putting that note in there so that the people later who would receive this letter, this book, would in fact understand what he's saying. On hearing his words, Some people in the crowd said, surely this man is the prophet. Others said, this is the Messiah. But others said, how can the Messiah come from Galilee or from the Galilee? Doesn't the Tanakh say that the Messiah is from the seed of David and comes from Bethlehem, the village where David lived? So the people were divided because of him. Some wanted to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him. So the guards were sent to arrest Yeshua and bring him back to the religious leaders of the Sanhedrin, but they didn't do it. But what we want to understand in this, as it talks about the spiritual eye, Yeshua was always trying to reason with the spiritual eye of the people, and specifically the religious leaders. And so they never could figure out that he was from Bethlehem. That's where he was born. Even though he had lived from the time he came back from Egypt in the Galilee area, northern part of Israel, he still was born in Bethlehem, and he was the very seed of David. And even the blind man cried out, Son of David, have mercy on me. So all of these things pointed to the fact that the people were not looking at him with the spiritual eye. They were looking at him with that fleshly eye, demanding that even all the miracles that he performed, that he returned the people to the place that they believed Messiah was supposed to do. And so having the spiritual eye, re'eh, open is imperative. The guards came back to the head of the priests, Kohanim, and the Parashim, or the Pharisees, who asked them, why didn't you bring him in? The guards replied, no one ever spoke the way this man speaks. You mean you've been taken in as well? The Pharisees retorted. Has any of the authorities trusted him or any of the Pharisees? No, thru. These Haaretz, or people of the world, do, but they know nothing about the Torah. They are under a curse. Nicodemus, or Nicodemus, the man who had gone to Yeshua before and was one of them, said to them, our Torah doesn't condemn a man, does it? Until after hearing from him and finding out what he's doing. They replied, you aren't from Galilee too, are you? Fleshly eye, I want to keep my position. I want to keep my status. I am not concerned about salvation, my soul. I want my position. He goes on to say, study the Tanakh and see for yourself that no prophet comes from Galilee. So the religious leaders were intent on looking through the eyes of the flesh and not understanding the spirit that was speaking to them as Yeshua was speaking to them, and now Nicodemus is speaking to them, and yet and still they are intent on their fleshly desire. So we have to learn to look at things with this re'eh, this spiritual eye. Moshe says, behold or see what I'm presenting to you. But you have to look at it through the right lens. Otherwise, you will remain confused and trapped in this fleshly realm in which we live. And so with that, we're going to get to the first part of our session, which, let me get my notes. All right. So in the first part of our session, we're going to see where Moses is going to talk to the children of Israel about seeing with their spiritual eye and understanding what is before them. All right. So he says, chapter 11, verse 26, see or behold, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you listen to the commands of the mitzvah of Jehovah your Elohim, I am giving you today. Remember, we understood that that word Elohim is a plural word, and it could mean lesser. It is not the one and only true and living God. It is used in some instances to refer to him. But you will notice how in this discourse of Moses, he continually reminds him, it is Jehovah your Elohim that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the specific deity over Israel of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the children of Israel, and the followers of Yeshua. So he's pointing out to them that you'll see a lot of places, the Lord your God. Well, who's the Lord? The Lord can either be all caps, it can be one capital letter, small letters, and it could be all small letters, from which we get Adonai. So we see then that it's important, and Moshe keeps reminding them which Elohim he is talking about. All right? And so we go on. The curse, if you don't listen to the commands of Jehovah, your Elohim, but turn aside from the way I am ordering you today and follow other gods or Elohim, small e, that you have not known. When Jehovah your Elohim brings you into the land you are entering in order to take possession of it, you ought to put the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Now, after they cross over the Jordan, they will come to the place where these two high hills, we'll say, that are called mountains, and in the valley is Shechem. So he's telling them one group get on one mountain, one group's going to get on the other, 6 tribes are going to get on the other mountain, and down in the valley will be the priests. And you will then do what? You're going to pronounce the blessings and the curses. And you'd have to get into the book of Joshua to see where that actually happens. Both are west of the Jordan in the direction of the sunset, in the land of the Canaanites or the Canaanite living in the Arba, across from Gilgal, near the pistachio trees of Moreh. Look at what Moses is saying here. These people haven't been across. Only the spies are going to go across later. These people haven't been across. Only Joshua and Caleb did. But they don't understand everything but he's pointing out these places to them. And when they get there, the Spirit will let them know. For you ought to cross the Jordan to enter and take possession of the land Adonai your Elohim, or Jehovah your Elohim, is giving you. You ought to own it and live in it. And you ought to take care to follow all the laws and rulings I am setting before you today. So this ends chapter 11, but look at all the information that we're gathering right there. He's telling them to go in, and when you get there, you're going to divide up into 2 groups. And one group is going to go on one mountain, and they're going to pronounce the blessings. The other group's going to go on the other mountain. They're going to pronounce the curses. And they're going to pronounce these, given that the Levites are going to be in the center, and they are going to tell them what to say. And all the people are going to say this. Here are the laws and rulings, chapter 12, verse 1. You ought to observe and obey in the land Jehovah, the Elohim of your ancestors, has given you to possess as long as you live on earth. You must destroy all the places where the nations you are dispossessing serve their gods or their Elohim, whether on high mountains, on hills, or under some leafy tree. Break down their altars, smash their standing stones to pieces, burn up their sacred poles completely, and cut down the carved images of their Elohim or their gods. Exterminate their name from that place. So whose name is he trying to exterminate? These false deities that the other people are serving. You're going to introduce to them Jehovah, your Elohim, and the power and might that he's given you to conquer that land is going to have these people say, I want to know about this Elohim, because the one I've been dealing with, he ain't doing too good. We go on as we complete the first part of our session, verses 4 through 10. But you are not to treat Jehovah your Elohim this way, whether you are come to the place where Jehovah your Elohim will put his name. He will choose it from all your tribes, and you will seek out that place, which is where he will live, and go there. Now, up until this point in time, the children of Israel had the tabernacle right in the midst of them. Yeah, but once you go across and fight in the land, you're not going to necessarily set up the tabernacle. You don't have time. You're going to have to go and fight and take that land. And so the time will come when Moshe is telling them Jehovah is going to pick a place to put his name, which is going to become Jerusalem. And David is going to buy this land that belonged to the Jebusites, and it is from there that he's going to establish the city called Jerusalem. And that's where Jehovah is going to tell David that is where the temple will be built. Up until that time, a lot of the times, the tabernacle, once they took all the land, then they set up the tabernacle in Shechem, and that's where it was. But being hides and animal skins and cloth, of course, with that desert, that temperature, it's going to wear out. So Jehovah has already revealed to Moshe that there will be a temple established, made of stone. And so you can read that as you read about David in Samuel, specifically 2 Samuel, where he gets those instructions and begins to deal with that understanding. You will bring there your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tents that you set aside for Jehovah. The offerings that you give, the offerings you have vowed, your voluntary offerings, and the firstborn of your cattle and sheep. There you will eat in the presence of Jehovah your Elohim, and you will rejoice over everything you set out to do, you and your households, in which Jehovah your Elohim has blessed you. You will not do things the way we do them here today, where everyone does whatever is in his own opinion seems right. In other words, he's saying now that you're going to be dispersed over all of that land, the temptation to do things in your own way is there, just as they are here. But now you are encased here where you can't do that. But that's what you're thinking. You want things to be in a different way. You don't recognize, looking with your fleshly eyes, what is before you. But now when you get across, you're going to see. And Jehovah's going to pick a place. And there you will build a temple. He goes on to say, you will not do things the way we do them here today, where everyone does whatever is in his own opinion seems right, because you haven't yet arrived at the rest and inheritance which Jehovah your Elohim is giving you. This is fascinating because he's telling them that once you've conquered that land and you have established peace, then you're going to face a whole different understanding of who you are and who Jehovah is. He goes on to tell them, but when you cross the Jordan and live in the land Jehovah your Elohim is having you inherit, and he gives you rest from all your surrounding enemies so that you are living in safety. So he's letting them know that this is what will happen when that comes. And I know many times we think about different things and why is it taking so long and what is going on and what is going on. But basically, everything that we get that brings us to that point, which is what Moshe is telling them up until this time. You've only thought about it. Now you're getting ready to go in there, fight, overcome everything that's in there, and now you're going to have to live. He's going to give you peace. So now in your rest, don't allow that to take you away from what Jehovah has commissioned you to do, and that is be a light to the nations. The second part of our session, where we're going to find out that he's letting them know that you can't, no longer will you make sacrifices anywhere else but at that temple. So when you live way up in the north, away from the land that Jehovah has his temple built, when you're far away from that, no more sacrifices. He says, then you will bring all that I am ordering you to the place Jehovah your Elohim chooses to have his name live. Your burnt offering, sacrifices, tents, the offering for your hand, from your hand, and all your best possessions that you dedicate to Jehovah, and you will rejoice in the presence of Jehovah your Elohim. You, your sons and your daughters, your male and female slaves, and the Levite living among you, inasmuch as he has no share or inheritance with you. So now you're going to be doing good. You're going to live a good life, but no more sacrificing anywhere but the temple. No other place can you sacrifice an animal. Remember, for Passover, they sacrificed it in their homes. And so now, no, for Passover, you're going to come all the way to the temple, sacrifice your animal there, and you're going to eat it there. All this is to remind you of the unification of this land under the authority of Jehovah, your Elohim. He said, be careful now, not to offer your burnt offerings just anywhere you see, but do it in the place Jehovah will choose in one of your tribal territories. There is where you ought to offer your burnt offerings and do everything I order you to do. However, you may slaughter and eat meat wherever you live and whenever you want, in keeping with the degree to which Jehovah, your Elohim, has blessed you. The unclean and the clean may eat it as if it were gazelle or deer. So now basically he's telling them that you can still kill an animal and eat it, but you're not offering a sacrifice of any type. You kill it, offer the blood, bury it, pour it in the ground, bury it, slaughter the animal, take the skins, eat the meat, do whatever you want. And even if you're unclean, you can still eat that meat. You can't eat unclean things, but if you are unclean, you can eat it because it's not a sacrifice. Now, what they're eating is always sacrifice because that's the only thing they can do if they want meat. Then they bring an offering to Jehovah and offer the sacrifice, and they get a part of the animal, the priests get a part of the animal. And so that's the system that they've been living under for 40 years. But now you're going to be in the land where that's not the case anymore. He says you are not to eat on your own property the 10th of your grain, not your tithe, new wine or olive oil that you set aside for Jehovah, or the firstborn of your cattle or sheep, or any offering you have vowed, or your voluntary offering, or the offering from your hand. No, you are to eat these in the presence of Jehovah, your Elohim, in the place Jehovah, your Elohim, will choose. So this will all be done at the temple. So now when you can celebrate the festivals, you're going to go to this place, and that's where you will celebrate the festivals. Pesach, unleavened bread, Shavuot, Sukkot, Yom Kippur. All of this will be done at the temple, at the place that Jehovah chooses for this to take place. that's where you will do it. And as long as you are living on your property, take care not to abandon the Levite. Remember, these offerings bring into the temple always are going to bless the Levites because it is from there that they can provide graciously for their families. So you don't forget that part. Now, as we complete the second part of our session, verses 20 through 28. When Jehovah your Elohim expands your territory as he has promised you, and you say, I want to eat meat, simply because you want to eat meat, then you may eat meat as much as you want. If the place which Jehovah your Elohim chooses to place his name is too far away from you, then you ought to slaughter animals from your cattle or sheep, which Jehovah has given you, and eat on your own property as much as you want. Other than what? The tent. That you cannot do that. That belongs to Jehovah, and it has to be brought to the temple or the place where the tabernacle will be established before the temple is completed. He goes on to say, eat it as you would gazelle or deer. The unclean and clean alike may eat it. Just take care not to eat the blood, for the blood is the life, and you are not to eat the life with the meat. Don't eat it, but pour it out on the ground like water. Do not eat it, so that things will go well with you and your children after you, as you do what Jehovah sees as right. Only the things set aside for Elohim, which you have, and the vows you have vowed to make, you must take and go to the place which Jehovah will choose. There you will offer your burnt offerings, the meat and the blood on the altar of Jehovah your Elohim. The blood of your sacrifices is to be poured out on the altar of Jehovah your Elohim, and you will eat the meat, that is, of the sacrifices that is allowed. There's also the completely burnt sacrifice. Obey and pay attention to everything I am ordering you to do, so that things will go well, and you, with your descendants after you forever, as you do what Jehovah sees as good and right. So we want to know what's good and right. We read the scriptures. The scriptures tell us, the commandments tell us what we should be doing. We don't have to guess. We can read the scripture. Now we've gotten some faulty interpretations that we have to understand. That's why we are studying Torah as we are studying and allowing the Holy Spirit to minister to us, because he is the Spirit of truth. We go on to the third part of our session, which is chapter 12, verse 29, all the way to chapter 13, verse 19. When Jehovah your Elohim has cut off ahead of you the nations you are entering in order to dispossess, and when you have dispossessed them and are living in their land, be careful, after they have been destroyed ahead of you, not to be trapped into following them, so that you inquire after their gods and ask, how did these nations serve their gods? I want to do the same. You must not do this to Jehovah your Elohim! Exclamation point. For they have done to their gods all the abominations that Jehovah hates. They even burn up their sons and daughters in the fire for their gods. This is interesting because the children of Israel, with all this warning and all this understanding, fell back into the very things that we're reading here. Fell back into doing it, and for that, they were taken into captivity because the land spit them out. Chapter 13, verse 1. Everything I am commanding you, says Moshe, you ought to take care to do. Do not add to it or subtract from it. If a prophet or someone who gets messengers while dreaming arises among you, and he gives you a sign or wonder, and the sign or wonder comes about as he predicted when he said, let's follow other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them. You are not to listen to what that prophet or dreamer says. For Jehovah your Elohim is testing you in order to find out whether you really do love Jehovah your Elohim with all your heart and being. Many times we've had different facets of the faith come and do something that we consider is a miracle. Predict something in the future, and it actually happens. However, he's teaching you things that are not Torah, such as prosperity gospel, things of that type. He goes on to let you know Jehovah is testing you to find out, are you really going to search for truth? Or are you going to fall in line with this foolishness just because someone was healed? That healing is obviously Jehovah. But does it line up with everything the word is saying? This is why Yeshua and all the miracles he did, the religious leaders felt he wasn't living up to the part of taking control that they believed Messiah was going to do, kicking out the Romans and allowing the Jewish people to rule their own land and the rest of the world. Rule king as king from Jerusalem. So no matter what he did, they even got to the point where they said, this is like Beelzebub. You're doing it under the power of the devil. And Yeshua said, no. Okay, what thing have I done that you want to stone me for, you want to kill me for? They said, nothing that you have done, but because you claim to be Messiah. Therefore, you ain't took control. You ain't ruling. Therefore, for that, you are blasphemy. And because of that, we're going to kill you. And he then goes back to show them, no, this is what the word says. Haven't you read that? Okay, that's talking about me. They would say, no, only way we're going to believe that is you take over. Didn't come to take over at this time. But I will return. So now they're waiting on him to come the first time to take over. And so no matter what he did, their hearts were hardened against him. So Jehovah is reminding us that some event might take place. But if it doesn't line up with everything else, don't follow that. You ought to follow Jehovah, your Elohim, fear him, obey his commands, listen to what he says, serve him and cling to him. And that prophet or dreamer is to be put to death because he urged rebellion against Jehovah, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from a life of slavery in order to seduce you away from the path Jehovah, your Elohim, ordered you to follow. This is how you ought to rid your community of this wickedness. So right here we see that Moshe is telling them, this is coming. We complete the third part of our session. If your brother, the son of your mother, your son or your daughter, or your wife whom you love, or your friend who means as much to you as yourself, secretly tries to entice you to go and serve other gods, which you haven't known, neither you nor your ancestors, gods of the people surrounding you, whether near or far, away from you, anywhere in the world. You are not to consent, and you are not to listen to him, and you must not pity him or spare him, and you may not conceal him. Rather, you must kill him. Your own hand must be the first one on him in putting him to death. They would take him out and stone him, which they were talking about doing to Yeshua several times. And afterwards, the hands of all the people. So you're going to throw the first stone. You ought to stone him to death because he has tried to draw you away from Jehovah your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of a life of slavery. Then all Israel will hear about it and be afraid, so that they will stop doing such wickedness as this among themselves. This was a continual problem with the children of Israel in the land of Israel. Continually, false prophets sitting around the king, telling the king what the king wanted to hear, eating real good. Then there would be the prophet that would come and tell them, no, don't listen to him. He's a false prophet. And what would they do? They would take the righteous prophet out and kill him. That's why Yeshua told him, which one of the prophets didn't you kill? You killed all the righteous, and you let the unrighteous, lying prophets live. Why? Because you wanted to believe that lie. He goes on to say, if you hear it told that in one of your cities, which Jehovah your Elohim is giving you to live in, certain scoundrels have sprung up among you and have drawn away the inhabitants of their city by saying, let's go and serve other gods, which you haven't known. Then you are to investigate the matter, inquiring and searching diligently. If the rumor is true, if it is confirmed that such detestable things are being done among you, you must put the inhabitants of that city to death with the sword, destroying it completely with the sword, everything in it, including its livestock. Keep all its spoils in an open space and burn the city with its spoils to the ground. For Jehovah your Elohim, it will remain a tell or like a place of death forever and not be built again. None of what has been set apart for destruction is to stay in your hands. Then Jehovah will turn away his fierce anger and show you mercy, have compassion on you, and increase your numbers as he swore to your ancestors, provided you listen to what Jehovah says and obey all his commands that I am giving you today, thus doing what Jehovah your Elohim sees as right. So with that, we're going to go into the fourth part of our session, which is Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 1 through 21. He goes on to say, you are the people of Jehovah your Elohim. You are not to gash yourselves or shave the hair above your foreheads in mourning for the dead, because you are a people set apart as holy for Jehovah your Elohim. Jehovah your Elohim has chosen you to be his own unique treasure out of all the peoples on the face of the earth. So he's reminding the people of Israel that you are special and you have to act that manner and be obedient to what Jehovah your Elohim is telling you. Do that. He says, you are not to eat anything disgusting. The animals which you may eat are ox, sheep, goat, deer, gazelle, roebuck, ibex, antelope, oryx, and mountain sheep. Any animal that has a separate hoof that is completely divided, and also choose the cud. In Leviticus, this is explained even much more in depth. So you can go back there and read about the animals that we are to eat. For example, the camel, he said, you are to not eat those that only chew the cud or only have a divided hoof. For example, now these animals you are not to eat. The camel, the hare, the coney are unclean for you because they chew the cud but don't have a separate hoof. While the pig is unclean for you because although it has a separate hoof, it doesn't chew the cud. You are not to eat meat from these or touch their carcasses. Now, once again, he was reminding that you are set apart. You're special. And this is something you're supposed to teach the world. But you can only do it if you obey. Of all that lives in the water, you may eat anything in the water that has fins and scales. These you may eat. but whatever lacks fins and scales, you are not to eat. It is unclean for you. We go verses 11 through 21. You may eat any clean bird, but these you are not to eat. Eagles, vultures, ospreys, kites, any kind of buzzard, any kind of raven, ostriches, screech owls, seagulls, any kind of hawk, little owls, great owls, horned owls, pelicans, barn owls, cormorants, storks, any kind of heron, hopies, and bats. All winged swarming creatures are unclean for you. They are not to be eaten. But all clean flying creatures you may eat. Once again, you can go to Leviticus and check this out fully. You are not to eat any animal that dies naturally, although you may let a stranger staying with you eat it or sell it to a foreigner, because you are a holy people for Jehovah your Elohim. You are not to boil a young animal in its mother's milk, basically telling you not to kill a baby animal on the same day you might slaughter the mother. Let that animal grow up and get direction in life. Don't kill them both on the same day. This is how you ought to treat animals. We go on to the fifth part of our session. Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 22 through 29. Every year, you must take 1/10 of everything your seed produces in the field and eat it in the presence of Jehovah your Elohim, in the place where he chooses to have his name live. You will eat the 10th of your grain, new wine, olive oil, and the firstborn of your cattle and sheep, so that you will learn to fear Jehovah your Elohim always. So basically, the whole system of gathering together in Jerusalem, all males, and many times they would bring their whole family. Well, you can imagine what that would do for the economy of that place. That would, first of all, it's going to fill the temple, so that there's plenty for everyone to eat. The city is going to, hotels, places, friends, whatever is housing you, you have an opportunity to give them a coin for what they're doing. So it's going to really boost the economy of that area and make it always prosperous and able to take care of the widows and the orphans. But if the distance is too great for you, so that you are unable to transport it, recall the place where Jehovah chooses to put his name is too far away from you. Then when Jehovah your Elohim prospers you, you can convert some of your animals, convert it into money. Take the money with you. Go to the place which Jehovah your Elohim will choose and exchange the money for anything you want. Cattle, sheep, wine, other intoxicating liquor, or anything you please. Well, remember, this is what Yeshua turned over the table because they were doing it in the courtyard of the temple. That's why they were exchanging money for animals, because people who were coming from too far a distance were purchasing animals that they wanted to sacrifice and give to Jehovah during their time when they were in the city, especially during the festival of unleavened bread, which was 7 days, and the feast of Sukkot, which is 7 days. The feast of Shavuot is only 2 days, but yet and still, if you wanted to sacrifice something and bring it, it could happen, but you would purchase the animal there. That is not your tithe. No, 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 no. Your tithe, you take that to the temple and make it work. You don't neglect the Levite staying with you because he has no share or inheritance like yours. At the end of every 3 years, you ought to take all the 10ths of your produce from that year and store it in your town. So that's the towns where the Levites live. So every 3rd year, you're going to pay 2 tithes. And you're going to make sure that one of the tithes go to the Levites in that city. So in that city, you're going to turn 20%. The orphan and the widow living in your towns will come eat and be satisfied, so that Jehovah your Elohim will bless you in everything your hands produce. So we learn there that the desire is for there to be enough wherever the priests were, the Levites, or at the temple, there's enough food. And so that's why when Solomon built the temple, there were storage rooms for grain, smokehouses there for meat. And so they would have all that so that they could take care of the widow and the orphans and all those that were in need, would always be able to take care of them. Every year we go on. Deuteronomy 14, verses 22 through 29. Every year you must take 1/10 of, I just read that. All right, so the sixth part of our session, Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 1 through 18. At the end of every 7 years, you ought to have a Shemitah. Here is how the Shemitah is to be done. Every creditor is to give up what he has loaned to his fellow member of the community. He is not to force his neighbor or relatives to repay it, because Jehovah's time of remission has been proclaimed. Every 7th year, you don't plant, you don't harvest for sale, you allow people to come and eat if they want to eat, but you don't sell anything. You allow the land to produce and do whatever it's going to do, but you're not going out planting crops. If there's seed that grow that were planted earlier, you're free to eat that. You're free for the fruit trees and all that. You're free to eat that, but you're not going to harvest that for sale. It's the year of Shemitah, the 7th year where everything rests. So basically, you can rest from those labors, enjoy everything that you have, that you've stored, which Jehovah said, I was going to make sure you prosper greatly in that 6th year, give you enough all the way through the 8th year. That's what I'm going to do. But you got to do what? You have to be obedient. He said, now verse 3, you may demand that a foreigner pay his debt, but you are not to release claim on whatever your brother owes. You are to release your claim on whatever your brother owes you. In spite of this, there will be no one needy among you, because Jehovah will certainly bless you in the land which Jehovah your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance to possess. So if you're obedient, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have a desire to help your brother. Nobody's going to have to make you help him. You're going to want to help him. And in that spirit, once again, Re'eh, in that spirit of giving, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to first make sure you can bless him. And then as you, with your spiritual eyes, make sure you take care of your brother and others that are in need, then I'm going to bless you more. He goes on, yes, Jehovah your Elohim will bless you as he promised you. You will lend money to many nations without having to borrow, and you will rule over many nations without their ruling over you. We need to really learn this lesson, because this country is determined, especially to deal with African Americans, in a very bad light. So if we could learn this particular lesson and how we should share and figure out things under a spirit of sharing, then we will understand that Jehovah, through his word, has said, I'm going to bless that. I'm going to bless you for doing that. Now, if it's not your spiritual life and you're looking at a way to prosper yourself at the expense of others, then it's not going to work. Why? Because you're doing it in the flesh and not in the spirit. He goes on to say, you are not to harden your heart or shut your hand from giving to your needy brother. No, you must open your hand to him and lend him enough to meet his need and enable him to obtain what he wants. Guard yourself against allowing your heart to entertain the mean-spirited thought that because the 7th year, the year of Shemitah, is at hand, you would be stingy towards your needy brother and not give him anything. For then he may cry out to Jehovah against you, and it will be your sin. Man, this is so much that we need to process and look at with our spiritual eye. Rather, you must give to him, and you are not to be grudging when you give. That's why Paul Shaul says, I love it. Jehovah loves a cheerful gift. In other words, the spirit of giving is in you. That's why you do it, because you love the fact that you can do it. And in that, Jehovah says, I'm going to bless the work. If you do this, Jehovah your Elohim will bless you in all your work and everything you undertake. For there will always be poor people in the land. That is why I'm giving you this order. You must open your hand to your poor and needy brother in your land. If your kinsman, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you, in other words, he sells himself to you because he can't provide for himself. So he sells himself to you. He is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year, you ought to set him free. Moreover, when you set him free, don't let him leave empty-handed, but supply him generously from your flock, threshing floor, and winepress, from what Jehovah your Elohim has blessed you with. You ought to give to him. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Jehovah your Elohim redeemed you. That is why I am giving you this order today. But if he says to you, I don't want to leave, this is your brother that says, look, I'm doing better here than I ever have in my life. My family is here. We have a nice little spot that we're living in. I want to remain with you forever. Then he's free to do that. Help him. He goes on. But if he says to you, I don't want to leave, because he loves you and your household, and because his life with you is a good one, then take an hour, you're going to pierce his ear through his right into the right ear. You're going to pierce that, and he will be your slave forever. Do the same. Slave here, remember, is a servant. Do the same with your female slave. Don't resent it when you set him free. Since during his 6 years of service, he has been worth twice as much as a hired employee. Then Jehovah your Elohim will bless you in everything that you do. Now we're going to get into the 7th part of our lesson as we get ready to conclude from chapter 15, verse 19 to chapter 16, verse 17. All the firstborn males in your herd of cattle and in your flock you ought to set aside for Jehovah your Elohim. You are not to do any work with the firstborn from your herd or shear a firstborn sheep. Each year, you and your household are to eat it in the presence of Jehovah your Elohim in the place that Jehovah will choose. So you're going to take it and give that offering at the temple. But if it has a defect, is lame or blind, or has some other kind of fault, you are not to sacrifice it to Jehovah your Elohim. Rather, eat it on your own property. The unclean and the clean alike may eat it, like the gazelle or the deer. Just don't eat its blood, but pour it out on the ground like water. Continually reminding them of these things, because the people in the land are doing exactly what Moshe is telling them they shouldn't do. And for that reason, they've been judged, they've been warned for many centuries not to do this. They don't care. Therefore, they're going to get out. Chapter 16, verse, how did I get there already? Okay. Observe the month of Aviv, first month of the year, and keep Pesach, Passover, to Jehovah your Elohim. For in the month of Aviv, Jehovah your Elohim brought you out of Egypt at night. That's the Passover. Celebrate that in Aviv, or the first month of the year, which is usually in the spring, sometime around March and April. You ought to sacrifice the Pesach offering from the flock of herd to Jehovah your Elohim in the place where Jehovah will choose to save his name, to have his name live. In other words, you're going to take it to the temple. Remember, the tabernacle's right there. But when they were in Egypt, they could eat it in their homes, or the death angel was coming the next day, and they were going to be kicked out of Egypt. But he's telling them now, once you are dispersed all over this land, you're no longer to do that. You're to bring it to the tabernacle or to the temple, and that's where you will sacrifice the animal. Then you are not to eat any hametz or leaven with it. For 7 days you are to eat with it matzah, the bread of affliction, for you came out of the land of Egypt in haste. Thus you will remember the day you left the land of Egypt as long as you live. See, so that's why we practice Passover, because he's reminding us that this is a time when you gather and you do this in honor of what I've done for you. And we do it in honor of not only that, but what Yeshua has done for us, because Yeshua was the Passover lamb. He goes on to say, verse 7, you are to roast it and eat it in the place Jehovah your Elohim will choose. In the morning you will return and go to your tents. For 6 days you are to eat matzah. On the 7th day there is to be a festive assembly for Jehovah your Elohim. Man, I miss these places. Do not do any kind of work. And as we complete our lesson for today, going from verses 9 through 17, you ought to count 7 weeks. So after the barley harvest is waved at the tabernacle or later at the temple, after that happens, you count 7 weeks. You ought to begin counting 7 weeks from the time you first put your sickle to the standing grain. So after they wave the grain at the temple, begins the count, no matter what day it is. You ought to observe the festival of Shavuot, which is weeks, which is after the what? 7-week period for Jehovah your Elohim with a voluntary offering, which you ought to give in accordance with the degree to which Jehovah your Elohim has prospered you. You ought to rejoice in the presence of Jehovah your Elohim. You, your sons and daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levites living in your towns, and the foreigners, orphans, and widows living among you, in the place where Jehovah your Elohim will choose to have his name live. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt. Then you will keep and obey these laws. You ought to keep the festival of Sukkot for 7 days. After you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and winepress, this takes place usually in late September or October. You, your sons and daughters, your male and female slaves, the Levites, and the foreigners, orphans, and widows living among you, all are going to celebrate in these tents for 7 days. 7 days you ought to keep the festival for Jehovah your Elohim in the place Jehovah your Elohim will choose. Because Jehovah your Elohim will bless you in all your crops, in all your work, so are you to be full of joy. 3 times a year, all your men are to appear in the presence of Jehovah your Elohim in the place which he will choose, which became Jerusalem. So all the men must show up, 20 and above, and most of the time, the men would bring their families. At the festival of Matzah, at the festival of Shavuot, and at the festival of Sukkot, they are not to show up before Jehovah empty-handed, but every man is to give what he can in accordance with the blessing Jehovah your Elohim has given you. So with that, we complete our lesson. And as I said, there is so much in that lesson that we should take to heart and understand, especially, at least in my opinion, as children of Jehovah our Elohim, and as African Americans, we need to look at this and understand that this is something we need to learn to do, because we're in a society whereby we need to learn to do this so that we can, in fact, exist within this society that we're living in a manner that Jehovah will honor what we're doing. And so with everything that this system is trying to set up against us, to me, it seems imperative that we learn to think with our spiritual eyes, Re'eh, so that we can learn to do not what this society has taught us, but what the word tells us is the right thing to do. And if you're doing the right thing to do, then the blessings of Jehovah will overtake us. And so if we begin to think in that way, and there are a lot of groups of people that are beginning to do that, come together and figure out how we can share with one another, how we can protect ourselves, how we can do all these things. And I'm just suggesting that under this banner is a way in which we can do that. So with that, that completes our lesson for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. For those that will look at this lesson after we post it tomorrow, thank you for whenever you join us. And with that, we're going to do our priestly blessings, and then we are going to dismiss. We point our hands towards one another from Numbers or Bamidbar chapter 6, verses 24 through 26. May Jehovah bless you and keep you. May Jehovah make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Jehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And with that, until next week, I say, Shalom.